I'm Carlin. This is Haley, Rachel, and Matt. We are the SHART team, and we're here to talk to you about the public health risks associated with hydraulic fracturing.
Hydraulic fracturing is a time-tested, proven technology. It's been used in more than 1 million wells worldwide for the past 6 decades. This is how it works. First, once the necessary infrastructure is in place, a drilling rig is assembled and inspected in accordance with the required safety and environmental standards. Only once we are satisfied that all the required standards have been met can drilling begin. When the well is drilled, multiple layers of cement and steel casing are inserted to create an impermeable barrier between the well and the groundwater. The well is drilled vertically until it nears the shale zone. Just prior to the shale zone, the well turns and horizontal drilling begins. The Empire State Building extends 1,453 feet from base to tip. The depth of a well can be over 8 Empire State Buildings.
Yet it's cheap.
After another cement casing is put in place to ensure maximum system integrity, a perforating device is inserted to create small holes in the casing and the rock. Then, fluids comprised predominantly of water and sand are pumped down into the wellbore, creating tiny hairline fractures. Gas trapped in the shale zone is released within the tiny hairline fractures and safely brought up the wellbore and to the surface. America has vast amounts of natural gas, which can provide a cleaner burning source of energy for more than 100 years. Technology is making it possible to safely and responsibly unlock this energy endowment. "100 years.
Okay, so they talk a lot in that video about safety, and here's an example of that.
Just give me a second.
Might be a little familiar.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So after watching that video, you're probably a little curious about what exactly is in the fluid that they pump down in these wells, because obviously it's getting into our homes. So this is what the fracking companies will tell you is in it. It's only 90% water, 9.5% sand, and 0.5% chemicals. Not that bad, right, at first glance? And if you look at like this general breakdown, you'll see that a lot of this stuff is in common everyday items like donuts, ice cream, M&Ms. I mean, it looks pretty delicious, actually. And if you take a look at Halliburton's website, it looks almost like, these guys aren't going out there to frack a well, they're going out there to plant a vegetable garden. Everything's clean. It's clean stim, clean stream, clean wave, clean sweep. And everything's all trademarked. It's got to be the real deal, right? Trademark it. But if you take a little closer look at what's actually in these fluids, like U.S. House of Representatives did in a 2011 report, you'll see that these fracking companies actually have used over 2,500 products, and these products contain more than 650 chemicals that are known or possible human carcinogens and hazardous air pollutants. That doesn't sound so delicious. So it's kind of like a greatest hits list of some of the chemicals that are found in fluids here. So we've got methanol at the top. That's highly flammable liquid and vapor. We've got naphthalene, fatal if inhaled. Hydrochloric acid, severe skin burns and eye damage. And then formaldehyde, suspected of causing cancer. We've got phenol, suspected of causing genetic defects. And finally acrylamide, which is suspected of damaging fertility or the unborn child. Those are only some of them. And now this is the actual list of everything that report found in fracking fluids. And so that 0.5% is actually looking a little bit bigger now, a little bit more serious. And actually that's not even all of it, because these companies do not have to disclose what's in their fluids if it's considered proprietary or trade secret. And because of that, we really don't even know exactly what is in there. And sometimes these companies don't even know themselves, because a lot of unknown chemicals that they use that they just buy off the shelf from another company. And actually over this 4-year time span from 2005 to 2009, the report found that companies use 93.6 million gallons of products containing at least one proprietary component. And to put that in perspective, we can think about that this way. 90 million gallons is how much fluid the Columbia River drains in the Pacific Ocean in 45.5 seconds. That's a lot. And we don't even know what exactly is in this stuff. Now this is what the companies will tell us. It doesn't look too bad. It's kind of like, the weak stuff. But they don't tell us the really bad stuff. But we can use these numbers, play around with them a bit, and kind of get a good idea of what's in there. And so we know that each fracking attempt takes 2 million to 9 million gallons of fluid, and we can kind of average that out to 5. We'll be generous. And each well can be fracked up to 10 times. So that's 250,000 gallons of chemicals in each of these wells. Now we can, use some of those numbers from the previous slide, those percentages, and say, well, that's 42,500 gallons of isopropanol. And that's the rubbing alcohol used in your cover to disinfect your cuts. And that's actually 340,000 of those 16-ounce bottles of 100% rubbing alcohol in each well. And that turns out it's 1,000 gallons of N,N-dimethylformamide, which is an industrial solvent. And you can see from the MSDS here, it's toxic if inhaled, may damage fertility or the unborn child. 61,500 gallons of acid. And then 44,000 gallons of petroleum distillates. And this is likely where you'll find the volatile organic compounds that we know are in fracking fluids that are carcinogenic and hazardous air pollutants such as formaldehyde, phenol, and benzene. And it turns out that actually each fracking operation requires 2,100 gallons of hydrochloric acid, which is about how much it takes to fill up this pool. And so, you can fill it up with acid, fill it up with water. It's not too different. It's the same volume. And so it's important to remember, though, that all these numbers are per well. And that actually, from 2007 to 2012, there were 4,200 wells drilled in Pennsylvania in the Marcellus Shale Formation alone. So if you take all those numbers, multiply it by 4,200, then you can start to get a better picture of what the real scope of this is like.
So as you can see, there are a lot of different ways that you can get exposed to these sources of the fluid. A couple of the main ones, as you can see here, are in the well and spring water and also in the creeks. A few of them, particularly on the plant, would be the power sources. These big trucks, the diesel engines are used to pump the fracking fluid down into the ground, and they give off a lot of exhaust. In between the process of pumping that water down into the ground, or the fluid down into the ground, and getting the gas into the pipelines, they flare off gas, and that has methane and benzene, and it's being released off into the atmosphere. The gas pipeline compressors release nitrous oxides and volatile organic compounds, and then in the process of transport, there's a lot of diesel exhaust and fracking fluids from the 1,000 truck trips for each well that are required. So, as you can see from the previous slide, there's a lot of different sources of air contamination. If you live within a half a mile of a shale well, the air pollution is going to be 5 times higher than the federal standard. So that means that these toxic chemicals like benzene and ethylbenzene are being released into the air around people's homes. And for kind of like a perspective here, a half a mile is just the distance from the Knight Library where we're at right now to the law library. So anyone living within that range, they're going to be affected by this highly toxic air. The main source, though, that we found is actually in the wastewater. 30% of the fluid that's pumped down into the ground it comes back up immediately and is stored in these man-made ponds that are about the size of a football field. They're 2 to 3 feet deep, and they are 6 times more concentrated than seawater, the contents. And they contain volatile organic compounds, and a lot of those are extremely toxic.
So here we have a model that describes the leakage and progression of a leakage if it were to happen, say, tearing the liner in the storage pit or from a spill. And this is flowback water and wastewater that we're talking about. And this is from the 2010 People's Oil and Gas Summit. So the top panel panel shows water if you're not accounting for the density. But since we know that this wastewater is 6 times more concentrated than seawater, it's much more dense, so it's going to flow faster and farther down, and that's represented by this bottom panel. And then the 3 sticks that are shown in the ground are monitoring wells, so they will detect a leak when the water reaches it. By year 2, you can see in the bottom panel that the wastewater has gone 100 feet deep into the water and has not been detected, or into the ground, and has not been detected by the monitoring well. By year 7, it has spread even wider, and as you can see, when you're not accounting for the density, this water would have already hit the monitoring wells. But when you do account for the density, it still hasn't hit it, and so your leak just keeps going, and you have no idea. By year 10, you finally have it hit the monitoring wells in the bottom graph, but by this time, your aquifers have been completely contaminated.
So Pennsylvania law permits well construction within 300 feet of residential properties. So all this leakage is a little bit concerning when you consider that 300 feet is the length of a football field. So all these toxic chemicals are crossing the football field and touching down on your family's property. So it's contaminating not only the groundwater, which is going to release toxins and in the air and in the water and affect both humans and livestock. It's also affecting the tap water, and there are so many uses that we don't even think about, like, you're using your shower, your dishwasher, your laundry, all these things are using fresh water, and if that's contaminated, you no longer can use it safely.
So when we think about how much water we are using throughout the day, as Rachel said, for bathing, washing your hands, doing your laundry, watering your garden, that accounts to about 90 gallons of water per day, per person, according to the United States Geological Survey. So if we were trying to replace all this dirty water that's been contaminated, that would be about 28 cases of the 24-pack of Dasani water per day that you'd have to buy and replace your dirty water, and would be about $420 to do so. If we're thinking about an average family of 4, typical American families, they would be using 360 gallons a day. Well, that would be 112 cases of a 24-pack of Dasani water that a family would need to purchase to replenish their water supply, and cost $1,700, not to mention all the plastic waste that you're producing in lieu of this. So how does that affect the person? Well, it can attack many different parts of your body. We'll start out with this young girl's brain, the other girl's respiratory system. That child will suffer psychological effects.
Why are they all so happy?
They don't know
They
yet.
don't know what's happening.
Oh.
It's a psychological effect.
Cardiovascular system and immune system. And it can cause symptoms as serious as difficulty breathing, chromosomal mutation, cancer, and other physical effects as well. So, would you want to end up in the hospital?
So to kind of bring this all home for you, I'm going to tell you a story that comes to us from the researchers at Cornell. There were 2 families, we'll call them the Smiths and the Johnsons. They lived within 2 miles of around 25 shale gas wells. And less than 1 mile away from both homes is a 4-acre wastewater reservoir. And it sits at a higher elevation than the homes, so when there was a spill, as happens, it spilled past the barriers and it flowed into a creek. And based on the erosion of the soil there, they estimate that the spill was happening for months. So, first they noticed that the neighborhood dogs and cats, they walk through these little puddles, they'd lick their paws, and then the cats and the dogs would get sick and die. Then the Johnsons had a horse who received a clean bill of health from the vet, but then a couple weeks later started becoming sick. The horse was suffering from anorexia. The vet figured that it was heavy metal poisoning, but they never did any tests, and the horse was later put down. There were also, there was a dog at one house and a goat at the other that were breeding animals and began having reproductive problems around this time. So, then little Billy Smith began suffering from some problems, and he was hospitalized with confusion and delirium. And the test showed that he was suffering from arsenic poisoning, which can eventually do that to your skin. So the family stopped drinking their well water, and little Billy slowly recovered, but not before missing about a year at school. Then, the Smiths started to suffer from symptoms including nosebleeds and trouble hearing and smelling, and the Johnsons were having similar problems. The doctors said that they were suffering from exposure to high levels of benzene, which is known to cause cancer and commonly associated with leukemia. So, Mrs. Smith moved her kids away, took them out of the house. She went back daily to care for the animals, livestock, and whatnot, and the Johnsons, they just decided they would stay home. So, after about a month, the kids were getting better. Their exposure was decreasing, their symptoms were going away, but Mrs. Smith, returning to care for her animals daily, she was getting worse, as was Mr. Johnson, who worked from home. And it's not just the people that the wastewater and all this other stuff can affect. There were multiple cases cited in that same report. One of them, there was a spill that spilled into a pasture and killed 17 cattle in 1 hour. In another one, there was wastewater dumped into a creek, and it was used by 60 cattle. Of the 60, 21 died, 16 failed to reproduce, and several miscarried. There were 36 other cows from that same herd that didn't have any access to the wastewater, and they were fine. And it can also make its way to your dinner table. In one case, there was a lining in a reservoir tore, spilled over to a pasture. Some cows drank it. Farmers quarantined their cattle, but eventually those cattle went to slaughter. And according to the farmers, there were no tests done before or after the slaughter for the presence of those toxic chemicals.
So, you guys, what do you think? Is it worth it? Is it worth sacrificing the health of the people in these communities for a resource that may only last us for another 10 years? The fracking method hasn't been around really long enough to see the long-term health effects that may manifest. So, what happens in 5 to 10 years when we run out of shale and people start having these symptoms that may or may not be more serious? So it's just kind of something to leave to think about. And if we'll get it to the end here.
Fracking is a form of natural gas drilling. An alternative oil is a oil gas drilling where you drill small holes. Water goes into the pipe into the ground. The pressure range is 7,000 feet down. The cracks release the gas that powers the town. It blows the frack. Yeah, totally fracked. But there's more in the H2O. Toxic chemicals help to make the fluid flow. With names like benzene and formaldehyde, you better keep it far away from the water supply. The drillers say the fishes are a mile below. The groundwater pumped into American homes. But don't tell it to the residents of Silverwayo. That water's fracked. We're talking fancy. The fracking's going on. With all this fracking going on, I think we need some facts to come to light. I know we want energy, but nothing ever comes for free. I think my world is on fire tonight. So the whole goes back to 2005. Bush said gas rules didn't have to comply with the safe drinking water act before too long. It was fracked 85 until the break of dawn. With the EPA out, it was in the States, but they didn't have the money to investigate. Said people couldn't prove fracking was to blame. All the while water was rolling up in flames. This is hard to contain, all the benzene release. If you get into the air, it can get into the streets. It's a greenhouse gas worse than CO2. Fracking doesn't run, things can find a taste too. Now it's not that drillers should never be fracking, but the government regulations from here that can reduce the toxins contained. They gas and wastewater, and the people will get sick, and the planet will get hot. The fracking's going on, with all this fracking going on, I think we need some facts to come to light.
Okay, so you guys get the idea.
Okay, thank you.